Dave and I have known each other for about 5 years, and we actually met at Casual Connect when it was in Seattle. So a lot of great things can come out of Casual Connect. So I encourage you to keep attending year after year, as we have. So it's been really great.
Strange relationships.
And strange relationships. Apparently, well, you've been in the social casino business now for about 3-4 years now, would you say?
Yeah, since we got into it early 2012.
And I'm guessing you didn't go to UNLV and study casino gaming. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And your originally you were a bagel maker, right? You made bagels in Brooklyn. Is that?
That's the main qualification for going into social casino.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, all right. So let's figure out how that all started and how that happened. You were doing digital marketing, and you had a digital studio, and then eventually you started a studio called Ayogo that you guys started from scratch and producing some of the early Facebook games. And then went to work and basically created a company called Blitzu, correct?
Correct. So the interesting, Ayogo was interesting because it was early days. It was when kind of the initial Facebook apps came out, and it was the Hot or Not and all the quiz apps, and then finally people started producing games, and so some friends and I left a company where I was responsible for working with EA and Nintendo, and started our goal was to create games on Facebook.
You're making a great science fiction game that had, what, 8 users?
That was, well, initially we wanted to create our own IP. And then what we realized, we were in Vancouver, and realized the first most important thing about starting a studio, and that's that you need capital. And so we found out that Vancouver was not the ideal place to raise capital, and ended up spending a great deal of time doing that. But like everybody else who needs money, we decided we would produce games for other companies. We had a relationship with EA, so we started creating games for EA on Facebook. We created some very, very early iPhone games, and that got us into the space. But the other part of it was kind of, it's about expectations when you create a studio. How many people here are game developers? Social casino developers? And publishers? Tech people? Money people? Okay. So, when you're starting a studio, it's really important to have partners who kind of complement each other's skill sets. And so at Ayogo, we were fortunate in that, we had business people. One of my partners was a phenomenal CTO, and so that really helped. But our expectation was that our personal expectations were around the fact that we wanted to create original IP. And then once we had to go out and create IP for others, that's when our interests started to diverge, and it was no longer nearly as fun as kind of like our initial goal, but we had to eat.
Were you able to raise capital then?
We were never able to raise capital, and unfortunately we were continuously able to go out and get clients that wanted us to produce games. So it was one of those never-ending cycles where we could make lots of money producing games for other people, but couldn't raise money to do our own thing. Okay. So then I was presented with this opportunity to run this other studio, and I jumped at the chance.
But the first game didn't meet your expectations.
So at Blitzu, we had a small group of very deep-pocketed investors, and one of the investors had a vision for the game that he wanted, and it was a space-based adventure game. And so the idea was to create this beautiful console-quality adventure game on Facebook, because they loved Facebook as a platform. So that was my mandate as a CEO, was to deliver this game. And then I learned that kind of delivering a niche game and appealing to that market is kind of a disaster. So this was obviously, by space, you're kind of initially, immediately in that it's a male-focused game. Monetization was an add-on, like we kind of bolted it on just to have there. And we kind of quickly realized after a year of development And we won awards, and the game was beautiful. It was brutally slow. And so the first lesson is speed is king. And that's something that continually amazes me about all games to today, is that if you can make your game faster, you will make players happier, you will make more money. And that's like kind of the first rule that I learned back then.
How did Blitzu get into social casino?
We released this game, and it was called Planetoids Inc. And after about 2 weeks, we realized that for every dollar we spent in marketing, we would make 10 cents. So not an effective business model.
No.
So we said, all right, next we need mass market game, and let's have monetization as kind of built in. So we created a game called Party On, and it was again won awards. It was a combination of home improvement and some type of Hollywood party game. And we realized that for every dollar we spent in marketing, we would make back 60 cents. So again, not an effective business model.
But you're getting closer to break even.
Close, maybe. And then I was at GDC, and I happened to have lunch with one of our investors and a gentleman who I know well from Caesars. I know him now. And they were talking about what Caesars was doing, and it was kind of right before the Playtika acquisition. But we were just talking about apps that they were looking at, and they were looking at various small apps that were poker apps and slots apps and lots of little things. But it gave me this idea when I went back to Vancouver, I had a friend who actually created slot machines for real money platforms in Europe. And so I called him up and I said, hey, would you be willing to license slot machines for Facebook? And he said, nobody's asked me, so why not? So we did that.
And what was the licensing deal that he made with you? Do you remember?
The licensing deal was, I think my NDA is probably expired right now. So I think we spent $200,000 for 10 machines and for exclusives. And I assumed, and I knew nothing about slots, I knew nothing about real money, and I knew nothing about the underlying principles of what made these games successful, which is really not the best starting point. But what I did know is that we couldn't release games the way we had been doing. So we kind of changed our studio structure. We went to a minimum viable product model. We went to kind of we had been developing an internal Kanban board, so we kind of knew what everybody was doing. We got very, very agile very quickly, and we broke every rule that my board of directors said kind of was necessary, which was, Zynga had kind of set the bar. You had to have leaderboards, you had to have quests, you had to have achievements, you had to have gifts. You couldn't launch a game that wasn't, fully fleshed out. And so what we did is I went to the investors and I said, all right, I want to do this game. I think it might work, and I promise I'll release it in 8 weeks. And so they said, if you can do that, we'll fund it. And it was kind of our last kick at the can. And so we released the game in under 6 weeks with nothing. We violated every single rule. We had 3 slot machines, we had XP and levels, but nothing was locked, so it was meaningless. We didn't even have a Facebook friends bar. And within 2 weeks, we had probably 25,000 players a day. Within a month, we had 50. Within 6 weeks, we had 100,000 players a day. Within 3 months, we had almost 300,000 players a day.
And what were you spending on user acquisition?
Our ECPI was probably around 10 cents.
Explain what ECPI is for those.
So the cost per install, what we were going out for was probably somewhere around 20 cents when we were, kind of buying players, and we were doing it just like everybody else was at the time. You choose a partner who's, an ad company. At the time, it was Ad Parlor, and we just started buying players, and we kind of, we looked at what were the other companies who were in the space, what was the demographic of their player. We just kind of copied it, And what we did was we created a friends bar like everybody else had, but we put a treasure chest on everybody's picture. And people instantly made the connection that if they invite somebody, they will get more coins. So our virality was through the roof. And that, caused our effective CPI, because of the virality and the other organics, to be very, very low.
But this is back in the days of the friend feed and everything got pushed to the
today.
feed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And today, what are you paying for users?
Anywhere from, again, the straight CPI is anywhere from $2 to $5. Your effective CPI is really dependent upon the quality of virality of your game. Obviously, multiplayer games, a poker game will have better virality than a typical slots game, but your eCPI hopefully is somewhere around $2.
So why slots? Why did you go into slots? And was it pure luck that you chose that over poker, or?
Well, it was definitely lucky that I chose slots over poker, solely because the person that I knew had slot machines, and Slotomania was out there. We were able to see how effective it was, and you're able to get a slot game out there much more quickly than you can get a poker game. A poker game is, you have to worry about fraud. You have an entire back-end infrastructure. It's just a much more complex game.
And after you went, did you put up all those 20 games? Is that what you had? 10 games? What was it?
When by games you mean slot machines?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had this license deal to get these 10 games. What we realized kind of quickly was that our partner was their idea of what a game should be versus our idea of what we thought was going to be successful were slightly different. So the art was taking a while to do, kind of and conceptually we were kind of gaining more and more knowledge of the space, and it would take us with them probably somewhere around 4 weeks to get each slot machine out there.
And so did you start to build your own, or how did that go, transferring from getting licensed into original?
We had them build us, in effect, an engine, and we started plugging our own art, animation, and sound into that engine. And at the time, unfortunately, we did not understand the concept of math models, and we did not know that there are these. Each machine has a different math model. Each machine has different volatility. We didn't really get that, or an understanding of how you should organize your lobby so that people had very positive first experiences and would to come back. So we had basically 2 math models for every slot machine.
And what would you say the norm is? How many math models can you get away with per? How many machines can you create off of one math model?
Maybe 3.
Before people figure it out and get.
Yeah, but I don't even know that they necessarily figure it out. I think just from an experience perspective, they kind of recognize that it's not a very varied experience, that they're kind of having the same experience day in and day out.
So SlotSpot became the number 2.
At one point, it was the second fastest growing game on Facebook.
Okay, that's pretty amazing.
It was pretty bizarre.
And tell us about the transition from the browser when the mobile started coming up and making that transition. Was that easy to do?
Well, obviously, I didn't make the transition soon enough.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we would be having a different conversation.
That was an issue for you guys that. But you did go to mobile, though.
Of course. So, but it was much later than what many of us wanted to do. It was when you're doing well on Facebook. There's a tendency to just kind of keep doubling down and not being able to push into other environments. We had built everything in Flash, so then we had to use Adobe Air to kind of go cross-platform. And at the time, Adobe Air was not the easiest. The integration with some of the ad networks was not that easy. The integration with some of the metrics platforms were not that easy. It wasn't as simple as it is today.
So today, how would you do it? If you could redo it, what would you do today?
Today, well, we are doing it, and in the last studio, we used Unity on the front end, and Nexon, we're using Cocos 2DX on the front end. I don't necessarily know that there's one answer for the best way to do it. I think, ultimately, to me, the key of having a successful studio is having a management that are at least more than one person who represent the core of your studio and the founders of the studio that have complementary skill sets. And so naturally, whatever the technology person and the technology team feel most comfortable with, that's what you're going to go with.
Okay. So let's talk about complementary skill sets, and that's an interesting transition to creating a new studio for NHN Entertainment. So I would say 2 years ago at Casual Connect, NHN were up here on the platform, and NHN says, "How would you guys like to build a studio?" And you and 3 other people built a studio in Los Angeles from scratch with, I think, maybe $5 million investment from one of the largest Korean gaming companies in the world.
And the question is?
Tell us about how that started.
So, it started with us being cooped up in a boardroom for a few weeks, kind of creating a business plan and milestones and a budget for NHN, and them kind of just using us as consultants to just kind of hitting us up for expertise on how to approach the market, and kind of ended with a presentation where they brought us out to Seoul and met the CEO of NHN, and he was very happy with what we had delivered, and him saying, "Okay, go do it." And the next question.
Plan was to do slots and to build an entire casino platform, slots, poker, blackjack, as opposed to separate apps. And maybe talk a little bit about that strategy. Why choosing to put everything under one hood, or as opposed to different?
Well, I can tell you why we chose to do it, and that's really more of a differentiation, logic. So I don't know that it's necessarily the right answer, but for NHN's purpose, when you really want to go big, and there are, literally there are 100 slot apps that are legitimate, and they just do slots. So if you want to differentiate yourself a little bit, you have a full-blown casino. So, and particularly when you have a deep-pocketed investor who really wants to build a brand, they found it easier to support a full-blown casino rather than a bunch of individual apps. Some would argue that individual apps give you the ability to cross-promote nicely, and therefore you have increased retention. Others would argue that you end up buying the same player twice or 3 times. So I don't know that there's necessarily a right or wrong answer. I will say that slots, video poker, slots and bingo, it's like peanut butter and jelly. So it's exactly the same demographic. Video poker, not that far away. So for most of the non-skill-based games, it's makes complete sense to have them in one bucket because you're getting the same user. Poker and real poker definitely is a completely different beast, and having it in the same app was always a little bit of an internal struggle, particularly because it takes so much longer to develop. Just the audience is so different. It's younger and male.
Is there anybody out there that has a social casino app that has a full casino suite, that has poker in it, that you think is doing it right?
No.
Okay.
No. I just think it's very tough to get both of those games right in a single app. It's if you're the other benefit, which you can still do it across multiple apps, but it's more difficult, is having a loyalty program that really encompasses everybody and encourages people to at least try other games and kind of work through a metagame. So, but there's nobody I know that kind of can do both of those things really well.
Not Double Down?
No. At least in my opinion, I still think that their non-skill-based games are where their money is made, and where it's what they really understand, and to me that's the core of their success. the poker part of it, the execution of it.
Yeah, no, the poker's not great.
Yeah.
But they know it.
They know everything. You know, they understand the industry completely at this stage of the game. You know, the people who really have the potential to do it, poker stars. You know, that's the company.
Really, because I find that they've sort of messed up their casino
Yeah.
in
But
real money in regular markets.
Totally agreed, but to me, they're the ones that have the expertise to really pull that off.
Yeah, it's easier to pull off casino than poker.
Exactly.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
So starting a studio from scratch and hiring an entire team. Talk about building up the team, how many people you hired, and how did you manage the workflow, and how did you set this all up?
So, you know, again, everything's about the team. And, you know, creating a studio, you know, any studio really, you know, represents the personalities of the founders. And, you know, if those founders are all on the same page, the studio tends to run fairly smoothly, especially, you know, your first employees are really critical. We were fortunate in that we had acqui-hired some people who, on the technical side, who were super skilled, as you know some of them. And so that was very helpful to have, you know, a great technical team at the outset. But setting up a studio is brutally difficult when you kind of know right off the bat that your goal is to hit a home run. You know, there's no singles, doubles, or triples. You have to hit a home run. There's a humongous investment, and you know you just start hiring. So what happens is, you know, you start hiring. You have to hire very quickly. You have to build up, you know, you have to build up the art team. You have to build up the game designers. You have to build up, you know, like front end, back end, QA, and so you end up, you know, having 27 people that you're really hiring very quickly in order to get a product out the door. And invariably, that alters the chemistry. That puts a tremendous amount of pressure on the team to kind of meet very early deadlines, and creates a lot of issues. So, you know, some of it works, some of it doesn't work.
What about your specific project management part of this, and agile development, and how you implemented that with the team?
Well,
and does it work? And do you have to do it? Is there?
Sure.
We've seen other examples where it's been a disaster by not doing it.
So I am, you know, ever since, well, even, you know, before Blitzu, when we were, you know, kind of even building projects for EA and Nintendo, we did everything iteratively, and I've been doing that for like 15 years. So I know that works. I know it works well. I know Kanban boards work really well, and, you know, whether you're using Jira or some other tool, you know, the interesting thing, I guess, is that Jira is all, you know, it's all digital, so you really can't, you as a manager can sort of see what people are doing, but you're more following tickets. A Kanban board is nice where you actually have people's names, and you can kind of follow, you know, you have a ticket in everybody's, you know, kind of slot, and you can actually know what everybody's doing. You know, but Agile is the only way to develop in this space. And the interesting thing is that people kind of get minimum viable product for a game as an app. What they don't get is minimum viable product for a feature. And that's all you really want, is to kind of break down a feature to the essence of whether or not a player wants to play that feature. Get it out there, get it tested, take the game designers' egos out of the equation.
Jira, Confluence, are you an avid user?
I have no choice.
No choice.
Yes.
Can you give us any advice about how to effectively use those platforms?
Not really. It's you know, they're not the most user-friendly systems, but you know, you set it up in a way that works for you, and you tell the team that there's no choice. You have to use it, and you try and just agree upon what does a user story look like, what do you put in Confluence, how do you move something along, you know, a pathway from design to art to development to QA, and you just do it.
Let me give you a leading question. How can you misuse it? Not setting it up properly.
Not setting it up properly, kind of not getting everybody's buy-in. You know, pretty much, you know, What's interesting is that for developers in North America, they typically support using those types of tools. And it's always been a struggle as running a studio to get your game designers and artists to use those tools. When you flip it over to Asia, as an example, it's been, in the last 2 studios, it's been unbelievably difficult if you're dealing with Asian developers to get the developers to use the Agile system and tools. And you can actually get the game designers and artists to use them. So it's familiarity.
So this a great transition here. So of course, right after NHN and right after that studio, you do Golden Sand Casino, and then the next, I think the biggest Korean gaming company, Nexon, comes along and says, "Help! We've got a studio that's in Seoul that is sinking, and we've been working on a game for almost a year, and it can't release. Help us." What do you do? How do you come in and help them basically take the studio and turn it around?
As gently as possible. So, part of it is I'm originally from New York, and thankfully I moved to Canada for 12 years, and so I've mellowed a bit, and I kind of have to watch what I say because sarcasm only goes so far in most of Canada. But the big difference in a studio, to be successful, communication is the key to life. And with communication, I generally like to think I have a fairly good relationship with my wife, but we still miscommunicate despite the fact that we love each other. Miscommunication is not an issue. It's not something that is wrong. The fact is not communicating is wrong. Miscommunication is merely an offshoot of communicating a lot. And so in Asia, miscommunication is viewed negatively. And so that's, the biggest problem is there is culturally a lack of communication because people don't want to miscommunicate. And that makes things very, very difficult when you desperately need to iterate over and over and over again, and you just want to fail fast.
Excellent. Well, it's a great transition. Do we have any questions for Dave? Yes. Hold on one sec. Let's get the mic over there.
Yelling is good.
I want to get it on tape, I think.
Hi. This might be too big a question for this setting, but what do you do with all of your data? You must have a lot of it, like customer interaction, user events, that kind of thing.
Too much data. So you can have a data warehouse and use a data visualization tool. You can use something like Upsite. You can there are lots of different tools. Everything is data driven. The only way to succeed today is to look at what the data says and to A/B test everything you can possibly test. And then everybody in the studio has to actually, write down what they believe is going to be the winner, and then you end up having a lot of free beers. Because the reality is that, game designers, people who run studios, everybody has an opinion, and it's shocking how often we're wrong about the little things. And following your gut is not a good way to go. The problem is acting too quickly when you look at the data. Because it's acting too quickly, and it's also the fact that there are so many levers that we can pull. You have to realize you can only pull one lever at a time in order to make use of the data in an effective manner. But I look at reports every single day. I try and ensure that as we release every 2 weeks, we're only releasing one new feature, so that we can see the impact of that feature on whatever metric it is that we believe will move as a result of that feature.
Thank you. I'm actually a data scientist at a social casino company, and I'm going to get that part of video, and I'm going to send it to all of the product managers at my company so they can stop freaking releasing multiple things at a time. Thank you so much.
Any other questions?
Sorry, tying into the data question, do you segment users based on data?
Absolutely. So all users are segmented in actually lots of different ways. So, you know, we primarily look at non-payers, or freeloaders is what we tend to call them, versus varying categories of paying users, of which we have 8. Then within each of those segments, there are influencers and non-influencers. So we segment out the influencers from those. You know, we're basically trying to figure out who we desperately do not want to lose, because when we lose that person, we will lose many other people, and consequently we lose a lot of revenue. So that's, I don't know if that fully answers your question, but that's how we look at everything.
Do you then sell the users that don't perform for you?
Sell them?
Do you pass them on through advertisement to other companies or so?
No.
Are you trying to monetize those players at all through like advertising networks and stuff?
Absolutely. So, you know, in the beginning, you know, we were very like morally high, and we said like we didn't really, you know, this wasn't about making money on everybody.
Yeah. Google has the same theory, never about making money.
And then you realize that, hey, you're killing yourself. You're providing a game for somebody, and if somebody never wants to pay, it's perfectly fine to show them an ad, to have them watch a video. There's absolutely no reason not to monetize the 95 to 97% of people who will never pay you.
Agreed. Any other questions? Well, thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.